To another show. This is the second podcast for Reseller Evolution. My name is Scott, and I'm here with
Carl,
and we are the Reseller Evolution team. What do you say to that, Carl?
That sounds good to me.
Reseller Evolution team. So this is our second podcast. We're in 2024. Our goal was to start in 2024. We did do our first podcast 2023, just kind of giving you some of who we are, what we're doing. Summed up 2023, and now we're looking into 2024, and we're going. I do full time. Carl, you've retired, so basically you're now become full time reseller too.
Yeah, I'm full time, but let's be honest. Like when you're retired, I'm not gonna grind out as much, but it's still good. It's still learning how you can expand and all that, and see how it goes, just without as much pressure,
Yeah, no, I understand that too, for sure. You don't want to spend your retirement stressed out about trying to hit certain goals in reselling. But, I mean, at the same time, you still set goals or expectations. So are you increasing your expectations or goals a lot now that you're retired? Or are you just kind of, you're still kind of just seeing how it plays out?
You know what? Part of this eBay thing is just the enjoyment of having a small business and expanding it, and the creativity that goes along with it, seeing what works and what doesn't work. That's almost as much fun for me as any of the financial aspects. So I want to keep doing that. I'm not dead yet. I can still work a few more years. How many antique dealers have you seen like in their 80s and 90s just like still
just hanging on to that
doing it?
Hanging on for that next pick, that next big find. I know.
Exactly. That addiction, I don't think ever ends, right? So that's my plan for the next 30 or 40 years.
Okay.
But, I really do also, honestly, as you used to make fun of me for my Excel sheets, I still like the business aspect. I still like the analysis of what we're doing. And, as much as I enjoy buying stuff cheap and selling it for a lot, I also enjoy that other side.
Yeah, there's something to say about the finding that holy grail type item, right? Like it's such a rush for sure. And when you expand your knowledge just through experience, you're going to find more of those type of things just in different areas of items, right? So
there's always more to learn. Like just before the show, I was just showing some Canadian military badges I got. I don't know anything about this stuff, but it's so cool when you find those things, and then you get to find out what's the rare ones, what are the common ones, and always learning.
Reselling, and we're kind of digressing off topic a little bit here, based on what we were planning on talking about. But I just want to say too that it's one of those things. Reselling is, or picking, I guess, picking in general, where experience over time makes you better, but the youth, like, because you're digging, it can be exhausting, right? You're carrying heavy items sometimes up and down stairs.
Not if I can help it. No,
you got to bring it into the house. You got to clean it.
Yeah.
You got to. In my case, I have a couple of antique booths, expanding to a third one right now, and so that takes a lot of work. You got to fill it up, like put all those items back into the truck after you clean them and figured out what you want to do with them. And then you got to take them to the antique store. And I like it right now because I'm physically able to do that. But my point is, in another, say, 15 years, being 53 now, let's say another 15 years, how's my physical abilities to keep that up going to be? But my knowledge is going to be so much better that I'm going to be finding able to make wiser choices and more choices, because I'm going to be, my knowledge base will have expanded quite a bit. So it's kind of one of those catch-22s, right?
Well, then you're gonna have to find a protege who's willing to carry around all the heavy stuff for you.
Well, I think that's the idea. I guess that's the thing, which is another expense because now you have to pay someone, right? There's a whole another dynamic coming into play there. No, that's good, Carl. I totally agree with you when you look at how long a lot of these pickers live. It's that drive, right? They're not bored. They're constantly out there. So that's a good point. Okay, so what we're going to talk about this episode is just things that we've learned along the way, because as a reseller, you do learn a lot of different things. We'll touch a little bit about what we're going to do or some of our plans, because they change constantly. So we'll probably be changing these as the podcast grows. But first, before we do that, Carl, let's talk a little bit about holiday sales, because at the end of the day, what allows us to keep going is we got to sell this stuff, right? So a lot of people were talking about economics and different things, but how did your holiday sales, 2023 Christmas into New Year's, leading into 2024? How were your sales?
Well, to be honest, they weren't the best, I think, but mostly that was me. I think in this business, you need to constantly list new stuff, because that's the stuff that sells the best. And I was dealing with, my retirement and all of that, and I just took the time off. So I wasn't doing a ton of things. I'm not upset. It was good, but I heard a lot of people say their sales were excellent. How was your sales?
My sales were excellent. I probably did the best I've ever done at the antique booth.
Yeah.
Yesterday, I'm expanding, so I get as of January 1st, I got my third antique booth. So we were in there doing some renovations to the booth with the owner of the store, and she said that December, like this December, was record breaking. It was the best December the store's ever had.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I'm going to say that my sales reflected that as well. Not everybody's did, and it's I hate digressing every time, but sometimes these topics just kind of take a turn for their own. But there, one of the guys that's two of the people actually, the people that I'm moving into their booth, they're not doing well, but they weren't able to pivot. They were strictly one type of product. Yeah. They had a very large booth, but they never pivoted. They never changed. And when sales dropped, they kept trying to force the same stuff out there. And their entire booth was like a rustic kind of, like, you almost have to see it to describe it, but they never changed. They never changed at all. They didn't have anything eclectic in there. It was all kind of the same kind of stuff, and it didn't work.
I think we've all seen that. We've all gone into those markets and seen that booth that never changes, where the inventory is always in the same spot, where they're trying to sell stuff that was hot 20, 30 years ago, and they're still trying to sell the same stuff.
Yeah,
and honestly, that also happens with people's eBay stores. I've seen that as well, where people are complaining they're not selling. Things are a lot slower. What happened to the market? And you look at what they're selling, and they're trying to get prices that they would have got before, and they're not willing to change or pivot.
100%, Carl. 100%, especially the prices. They were really high. I never really understood that kind of stuff, although I did buy a few things from them just because it was, I don't know. I did buy a couple things from them, small things, very cheap and cheap looking things, but I bought them for certain reasons. So I guess there is a bit of a demand for it, but not what they were doing, like not in the high demand. A year ago, I think they did very well. Like I think they were doing okay, but they needed to change a little bit. They needed to adapt,
especially when you're paying rent.
Especially when
because then you like, for me, I have a little booth, but the rent is that it's a small aspect of my business. Most of my business is online, and I don't have to. My cost for eBay store is minimal. So it's like I don't have that pressure necessary to move out old inventory because it's not really costing me that much. But if you're paying hundreds of dollars in rent, you can't just have stuff sit there. It's costing you money.
Yeah. And that's going into the second person I was about to talk about, who just gave notice as well.
Mm.
And I talked to him before, like I didn't know he was going to give notice, and I kind of just met him. He's relatively new. He might have been there 6 months, but anyways, his numbers were $400 for the month. That's all he made, and he was probably paying $300 a month just for rent. So by the time commissions and everything come out, he didn't make anything. He might even have been in the negative, most likely in the negative, because he still had to purchase those items. But all his stuff was way overpriced, and it was all high-end stuff. And you can't do that. You have to
know your market.
So you had one guy with a bunch of junk, and you had another guy with high-end stuff, and neither one could make it. You have to be in the middle of that. And I don't want to call the one guy's stuff junk, but it was old rusted metals. It was rusted, beat up stuff, but it had a distressed, I guess you would call it, look to a lot of things. And I guess there was a bit of a market for that as maybe home decor, but that's all it was. And the other guy was all high-end stuff. Like, you get those high-end collectors, they come in once in a while. You know what I mean? So it's nice to have a few of those higher-end stuff there. I've sold items for $800, $1,000, $500 out of the booth, but sometimes they sit there for a while for that right guy to come along. And I when I talked to him, I even said to him, I said, listen, I said, you got to find out how the store's doing, because if the store's doing good and you're not, that's on you, right? If the store's doing bad and you're doing bad, that's on the store. They need to change. But the store had a record December, and you didn't even make rent. You know what I mean? Like,
you have to, like, for when you're new, you're also like, I know for me, it's only been about 6 months too. You kind of learn about what's going on in the store, or what in your booth, I should say, and what it sells and what's proper. And that's a bit of a learning process as well.
It's a learning
process. You can't keep paying that $300 or $400 and just barely covering yourself, because, like you said, you're actually, especially, you're not even accounting for your time. It's just not worth it. And we discuss things often of what belongs in the booth and what belongs online. Sometimes it's a bit of a learning process. Or sometimes
in 100%, I agree with you, but you have to be willing to learn, right? Mm-hmm. So that's a good segue into one of our topics today, lessons we've learned. So that's a good way. But first, I want to get back to holiday sales, because my eBay sales were very good, considering the number of items I had. I was really happy with it. In fact, I kind of went into holiday mode myself. Like, so a week, maybe even a week and a half before Christmas, and then after Christmas, I figured sales would be okay after Christmas, but January, they usually pick right back up again. But I was still selling. There's a couple days I had like 5 or 6 items in one day going out to the post office. Like, I'm like, I'm driving and I'm seeing 5 or 6 parcels there, and I'm like, wow, like, I didn't expect to sell anything at this time. Like, they should be eating turkey dinner and the hangover. But I still pulled out some sales, and going into 2024, as I mentioned the last time, it's all about consistency and listing lots of stuff. So
and if people don't realize too, it's like some of the busiest time for online sales is actually beginning of January, because a lot of people think everyone's just buying for Christmas, but I think what happens is early Q4 can be I should say not early Q4, early January is the best sales for me sometimes, because a lot of people are buying the stuff they didn't get for Christmas.
Yep.
So don't dismiss that time.
Right. And I didn't totally dismiss it, because I put more effort into the booth, because, the week up to the booth, shipping is going to be an issue if you want a Christmas gift. So I kind of focused that people might come in and do some last minute shopping. And then you always get those people that, what do I do during my holidays? Let's go to the antique store. You know what I mean? Just take a look around. So I made sure that side of things were full. I just slowed down the listing on eBay. That's all. Just at that time. So, okay. So that was our holiday stuff. So I think 2023, in my mind, in my little world of reselling, I'm very happy with 2023, and I'm happy with the way it ended, because it was looking a little scary based on what people were predicting with the economy stuff.
Yeah.
But I've said this before in the past too. The old timers have said that some of their best times for selling things were in recessions.
Yeah.
If you go like alcohol and cigarettes, sometimes during a recession, those are the things, those, what do they call that, Carl?
Inelastic demand.
No, but the sin products or something like that.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Right?
Well, I was going to go with wants and needs, but yes.
Yeah, I guess if times are tough, alcohol and cigarettes become a need, not a want.
If only we could sell that stuff, eh?
Yeah. But yeah, so they've said that some of the sales were the best times during recessions or hard times. So
and also that's the sort of thing we don't have any control over too. We can't predict when the next recession is. We can't, or the boom.
Yep.
And no matter what we do, we have very little control over that. What we do have control over is what we're buying stuff for, what the sorts of things we're buying, and the prices that we're setting out.
Yep. And we're I just learned a lesson, because my prediction, and you just said it, you can't predict what's going to happen. My prediction was sales were going to slow down a lot the week before Christmas and just after Christmas online, and it didn't. So the fact that I stopped listing there for basically 2 weeks just to kind of take a break and focus more on the booth was probably a bad decision. In hindsight, like, it wasn't a horrible decision. Like, we all need breaks and different things too. But
yeah, you don't have so much time.
Maybe I should have kept pushing it, and my sales would have been even better. You know what I mean?
Well, you just double yourself, and then you had no problem. I think too. Like, for me, it's kind of not really full time. I didn't want the stress of like getting things shipped out to get something under the Christmas tree. So sometimes I'll make decisions not based purely on economics, but just based on stress.
Yeah. Well, and I would never, ever respond to anyone's questions if they were saying, will this get here in Christmas? I would never, ever say, yeah, it'll get there. Like,
I would say no. I got one of those questions. I said, probably not. But it made it anyways.
Yeah.
Or actually, the person didn't even care. The person in the end, they asked that, but they didn't actually care.
Yeah. I would just say, like, I have no clue. I don't know. Now, it's funny because, okay, so when was Christmas Eve? That was like a Sunday, right? So I think on a Thursday, somebody bought a Santa Claus plush. Like, it was vintage, and it was a Santa Claus plush. And I'm like, there's no way they're getting that before Christmas. There's no way. But I never got a complaint or anything about it. It's obviously not going to get there, but
you know what? Shipping was pretty good this year. I think last year was pretty good as well. Yeah. It was just 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years ago that things were really bad. But I've had very little problems with shipping, actually.
I only had one guy concerned.
Yeah.
And I said, I will give it to Wednesday, because he put in, he hasn't received it. And the tracking showed it was stuck in Chicago.
Yeah, I'm like, what are you going to do?
Yeah. And I'm like, I wrote him a response. I say, like, it crossed the border. It's in your country, but it's out of my hands, right? Like, there's tracking there.
Yeah, that's a good point, because as sellers, we are going to get those things. Like, I've gone to those, and you feel like you should be doing something. But honestly, there isn't much you can do. You just emphasize to the customer that it was shipped on time. Don't be condescending to their questions.
No, never.
People do that too. They just want their thing, right?
Yeah, I'm sympathetic to their. They paid money for it. They want it, right? Yeah. So my response was, I believe this was like a Friday or something. I said, let's give it to Wednesday. There's a lot of parcels going through the post office right now. If you haven't received it, I'll contact the post office and see what we can do. So Wednesday, he still hadn't received it. And I responded, I'll contact the post office and I'll let you know what they say. You know what his response was? He goes, don't worry about it. You're right. It's from the previous email. It's this time of year. Let's just give it another week and see what happens. And he got it. And he was very happy. 5-star review. So he was actually, I don't know why he could watch the tracking. I even copied in the message the tracking number again. The first message, but he could obviously see where it was going. So for him to respond with a kind of a complaint when he knows the answer,
He's
and then
he's worried. He wants to do an action, and he doesn't really care about the reaction. He just wants to feel he has some control over this, or someone has control over this. Where you don't know
but
that.
then he followed up with a really realistic expectation,
Yeah.
right? Like response. Yeah. So anyway, it turned out for the best. Everybody's happy. I'm happy.
Yeah.
He's happy.
So that stuff is going to happen. I also had a item not received. The tracking shows delivered, and they said they haven't received it. So for that situation, I just said you need to contact eBay and leave it as that. I think in that case, I kept my money for the sale because I did everything that I'm supposed to do. Yeah. He actually received his money. It's such a small amount. It's like a $15 sale or something like that. But I think the key thing is always be polite. What you don't want is a negative feedback for no good reason. And the bottom line is, when we read these messages that we get for buyers, our minds put emotion into the messages that we get. And sometimes we put the wrong emotions into there. You know what I mean? Like someone might say, where's my item? And you can say like, where's my item? Or it just might be like, oh, do you know where my item is? You know what I mean? There's two different ways. And I sometimes see people act negatively and then they create their own problems, right? Most people just want to be heard.
And that is 100% true in my experience as well. I always, you have to approach it like the customer's always right, but in your mind, that if you got to stand your ground, you're prepared to do that because they're not always right. But you do have to show, they're a customer, they're paying for something. You know what I mean? So even if it's like a $20, $30 item or whatever, they're still paying for something. It's a service, and they could be eBay buyers in the future. We're representing everybody that sells on eBay. We're representing the platform, and we got to make sure we do it right. So that's 100% true for sure. Anything else that you learned going forward?
I'm just going to talk in general. Some of the lessons I've learned in the past. I've done this: is you find an item and you don't look at it properly, because it's a really good item, and you don't want to look too closely at the item to see if there's a flaw or if it's missing parts, and you just go and buy it. Has been a problem in the past. I've gotten a little better at it, but that's still something I struggle with. If any of the listeners are experienced, they probably know this too. So I've learned to be a lot more careful. I must admit, I do have a tarot card deck next to me that was not complete, even though I vowed numerous times to count the tarot card decks before I bought them. Sometimes that's extra little time spent there will save you the $7 or $8 that basically I just threw in the trash. How about you? How about a lesson you relearned?
Yeah, and I find I do that more so in auctions because there's so much items there, and you glance over everything. You think you've got everything in your mind, especially that you're very interested in. And then all of a sudden he holds something up and it's like, oh, that looks pretty cool. And then all of a sudden you're in it for $25. It sells in your mind for $100, and then you get it and the neck was glued on, or the fingers are broken off, or there's a crack in the bottom or something stupid. And it's like, it's worthless. You know what I mean?
Worthless. Yeah, right? And that's always going to happen, I think, to a certain extent. Like, there's always a bit of a gamble, especially, like you said, in auctions.
Yeah.
Because sometimes the gamble will pay off, right? But yeah, do your due diligence as best you can.
Yeah, so sometimes what I'll do now is, like, let's say I didn't have a chance to do my due diligence on a certain item because there's just too many, I got there late, whatever the situation is. Now it becomes how much I'm willing to invest in it. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. What's the odds of things being damaged? What kind of condition was the items in here? So if it's an estate auction, it's primarily from the same people. You know what I mean? So if they took good care of their stuff and it's all clean, chances are it's in good shape. Yeah. But if it looks like it just came out of a barn and it sat there for 50, 60, 100 years and it's all covered in dust, I might have a second thought on how much I'm going to pay for that, right? So there's different ways I try to reduce the risk that I'm going, but probably the main one is how much I'm going to be willing to spend at that time if I'm not sure what the item is, right? So one of the things, it's kind of the same. One of the things I've learned is to really watch what I'm spending on my items. Like that's probably my biggest lesson is just fall in love with the deal. Don't fall in love with the item. Right?
Yeah.
So,
and we were talking about in practical terms. I've actually had this discussion with lots of people of how much do you pay for stuff, especially when you're in that negotiation. Like, what is an okay amount? And I don't know about you, like just what I do is basically a third as a general rule. So if something's worth like $90, I'll probably pay up to most probably 30. But I want to pay. Don't get me wrong. I'd love to get it for 5 or 10. I'm just saying, in a general rule, that's what I do. But if something sells for $3, I'm not giving them $1. I give them like I want it almost for free because of the time, right?
yeah.
So negotiation is something I always have to work on. I know, especially with garage sales coming up, you and I have had many discussions about that, and I am not good at garage sales. They say I want 20, I go, oh, okay, and I just give them 20. So we're all. I think like for my lessons for 2024 is like talking about garage sales is like how to be a little bit better at that negotiation, and also how to be more efficient with my my time, because what I don't do very well is accounting for my time. I know we've talked to Adam from Shipping Vintage, and we've talked about when we go to pick up from an online auction, we need to account for our time. Like if you're driving an hour out there and an hour back, that's 2 hours of your time. You want to make sure you have enough net. And I'm good at that, but sometimes I don't really think about that so much when I'm driving around the city going to thrift stores, that I'm spending like 5-6 hours. And if I'm only getting like $100 worth of stuff, maybe I should really be rethinking about how I should spend my time. I haven't been the best at that.
That's in my mind. All of a sudden, there's an explosion of how this can look out. So when I talk about how valuable my time is, first of all, there's gas, there's wear and tear on the truck, all that kind of stuff for sure. It's also future contacts. You know what I mean? So take a business card, be prepared to leave your phone number, that kind of thing. Because sometimes people aren't prepared also. I don't know if I've ever mentioned this before, but sometimes people aren't prepared to take you in the basement. Maybe they're the only one dealing with a yard sale, right? Maybe they have some stuff, but they want to go through it a little bit first because there might be something sentimental to them in that box or boxes. So they want to go through it.
Yeah.
So be prepared to leave your phone number on a business card is probably best. Because you might not get anything there, or maybe you just want to buy something at their asking price to kind of set a tone, but you want them to call you back. You know what I mean? So you're also setting something up for a future. You know what I mean? I remember I got those spaghetti lamps, a bunch of mid-century modern stuff.
Yeah.
It was a huge barn. They didn't want nobody going in the barn, and I don't blame them. There's 20 people picking through this large, at the end of the road, yard sale. The barn was full. Their father, the woman's husband, and the kids were there. So their father and husband had passed away, and he had a barn full of stuff. Now, I left my card with the intentions of them calling me to come back and pick that barn. You know what I mean?
So how did you do that? So how did you give your card? Because I know for a lot of people this is going to be a fear thing, and for me too, it feels awkward, right?
Okay.
You're at the garage sale, you want to say you're interested if they have collections, but you don't want to come across as like,
So what happens is, and this is really 90% of the time. Okay. So I'm going through their stuff and I'm like, holy shit, there's a lot of really good stuff here and a lot of really good prices. Right. So I'll grab a couple that I want to buy and I'll say, I'm going to build a pile here. Where can I build this pile? Now they know I'm picking. Now they know I'm a lot of stuff. And either I'll bring it up or they'll say, like, do you resell this stuff? They'll ask me questions. And my answer every single time is, I have a small antique booth. It's not small. It's large. Right. There's many of them. But I'll say I have a small antique booth. I come out Saturdays. I have a little hobby where I pick and I put it in the booth. It's not going to get me rich, but you know what? It gets in with me Saturday mornings, and it's a fun thing to do. I really enjoy it.
Right.
There's my speech. Oh, I know Waterford Antique Booth, or oh, we go to the one here. Have you ever been there? Like a conversation develops, right?
You show them that you're a person who cares about this stuff.
And I'm not going to get rich off your stuff. It's just something I like to do, right? So I'm going to buy some things here. I'll put it in my booth. Other people will enjoy it in the future. That's what's, you know what I mean? You're building a story. So then from there, something will happen. And, well, what do you like? Or, you know, I get this all the time. Well, like I said, they'll say, what are you looking for? I'm looking for antiques. You know, oh, I'm an antique. You want me? You know what I mean? And I'm like, that's 10 times a day, dude. That's 10 times Saturday, right? And you got to laugh every time. Like, you got to pretend you've never heard that one before.
Right.
So, because you want to build that friendship. So anyways, I'm kind of digressing there. But anyways, so I just explained, you know, anything kind of early 90s, but mostly 80s, 70s, or older, I'm interested in, right? And based on condition and stuff like that, I'll make a choice decision what I want. So they'll pull me into the garage, they'll pull me in the basement, they'll direct me to different areas. But if they're busy, they can't do that. Hey, I'll leave my number. They'll ask me for it, and they'll call me back, or I'll just offer to leave it. I said, give me a call. You know what I mean? I said, if there's things I'm not interested in, but you still, I said, I have other people who are interested. They might be interested in this stuff. At the time, I wasn't doing furniture, and just say, I know people that are doing furniture. So if you got some of that, I could, if you want, I can give them your number, make it look like you're helping them, because you really are. You're helping them clear this stuff out of their house. And a couple bucks off it.
I tend to mind read sometimes what the other person's thinking, and usually I'm incorrect. Right? Well, there's a lot of people, sometimes they just want to get rid of the stuff, or they want to downsize, or they don't want to get ripped off. I think that's the fear that I perceive in the other people. But sometimes they don't really even care about the money. Sometimes you don't know. I think that's the thing. You don't know what their incentive is.
I don't even bring up values right off the bat. The value comes later. All it is right now, this is what I'm doing. Let's take a look. You just want to see the stuff. You'll determine values and prices later on. That's how I work it. That's how I do it. Yeah. I just want to be able to get into your house and see that small little crock from Simcoe, Ontario that's worth $1,500, and you were gonna throw it out. You know what I mean? That's what
save it for the dump is a big one too. Yeah, I never heard that. I threw out all that old.
Yeah, and then you're just like, oh my god. But so that's where I'm going. That's what I want to do. Like all these guys that are playing video games, those things are so easy to look up. They already have a price in mind. They already know what it's worth, right? But a lot of this other stuff they don't. Anyways, I'm kind of digressing. So that's kind of how I go about it. I'm prepared to leave my numbers and I explain where I am. You know, a lot of people already know it because a lot of my picking is from around here. When it comes down to the prices, how do I deal with prices? Well, I usually have a bulk pile, and I'll ask them what they're thinking for this stuff, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of times they're, what do you think? Sometimes if I think I can get away with it. So one of the things I get a lot, and I really got to feel out the person, is because they'll say, well, like I'll ask them, like, what are you thinking for a price? Like I'll have a pile of stuff there. So I'll say to them, what are you asking for this? And if it's reasonable, I don't even negotiate. It's right up front. But if I think it's a little bit high, or I should be doing a little bit better because I'm not 100% sure on some of the items, that kind of thing, I counter. But if they say to me, like, I don't know, what do you think it's worth? One of the things I usually say, and I've heard it from somewhere else, and I really think, you know, it kind of works, is like, I don't know, it's hard to be both buyer and seller. You know what I mean? I'll come back with that because it kind of sets a tone, like, you're the person selling it. Like, why would I name the price? Like, but there's other times I want to be the guy that says the price first, because if I felt it out, and this comes with experience, I think too.
Yeah.
You kind of think like they're really just getting rid of this kind of stuff. I'm going to lowball it a little bit here. Or on the other hand, this guy's going to ask for a lot. I got to set the tone right early with a lowball offer, because I know he's going to counter it with a higher one, and we got to meet in the middle somewhere. And I don't want him starting at 1,000 I'll start at 200. You know what I mean? And hope for 500. You know what I mean?
This is such a good skill for you to have. Okay, I don't think like if you're, I don't think you're natural at it. I'm saying you have lots of experience doing it, but you know you've built up this skill over time. I just so the listeners know, I find this extremely difficult. I've been chased at garage sales to give them back an item. I've had people say, "Oh, name a price," and they get extremely insulted at my price, and then find out later that the price I gave them was probably too high. That stuff burns me, man. Man, I don't forget it. So whenever Scotty and I've asked Scotty 1,000 times the same question: how do you negotiate? Because I'm not a natural at this stuff. This is why I like auctions and like thrift stores, is because I don't have to worry about the price. The price is there for me.
I find it a lot like playing Texas Hold'em poker. You know what I mean? You're reading people, you're looking the odds, you're looking the price. Like there's a lot of variables going into your decision, and you got to kind of cram it in. Like the sparks in your brain are going off like crazy. And sometimes I'll just sit there and stare at the product and like hum and haw. Like I really don't know.
The awkward silence in negotiation.
Because I'm like, I really don't know. Like a lot of this stuff, and I could be fibbing a little bit with them a little bit, but I'm like, I'm gonna have to look about. I'm gonna have to look this up, and they take rent, and 13% commission plus I gotta pay rent. So, I'll explain to them. I'm trying to equate this in my brain, but at the same time, I want to be fair to you. Like we're going. So you make it look like, and sometimes it is. The struggle is there. You know what I mean?
We're gonna have to 100% have an episode on this.
Yeah,
because I think when I watch YouTube channels or listen to podcasts, they don't really talk about the nitty gritty too much.
And that's the fun part to me, is the nitty gritty. I love it.
It's so awkward. So we're gonna have just an episode.
All right, so we'll cut it there as far as that topic, and we'll do an episode on sourcing. and negotiating, really. Anything else you would change going forward based on your learning?
Yeah, for sure. Like the episode's getting long, so I'm just going to add one more thing that I'm going to concentrate a lot more on is STR, which is the sell-through rate. How quickly does your item, that the category that you're looking at, actually sells? For me, who does mostly online sales, and I'm doing a lot more newer stuff than I think in general that you're doing. For me, I'll look at electronics, for example, and I might not check. Traditionally what I would do is I go on eBay app and I check to see what things sell for. Over time, I found out that if you're not careful, you get a store full of stuff or a basement full of stuff that isn't moving. Because 5 things sold, but there's 100 things online that haven't sold, and that sell-through rate is really low, like how quickly things are moving. I'm going to pay a lot more attention to that, especially for the items in the $15, $20, $25 range. That stuff is the stuff you find often, but it just sits in your store.
Well, I see. Now, I come from a different background. You came from thrifting to sell on eBay. I come from picking, like through yard sales, estate sales, auctions, to sell in an antique booth environment. So what I've come up learning is totally different from you.
Yeah.
So one of the things I started out doing. So if you grow up in the city eating sushi at a restaurant, it's different than growing up in the country and going to catch a trout in the creek. You have different ways of eating fish. Little bit of an analogy there. I just made it up. But
funny thing is, I was talking about sushi eating just the other day. So you hit the nail on the head.
I love sushi, but I also grew up creek fishing for trout. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's what I grew up doing. So my experience of eating fish, picking, is going to be different, and reselling is different than yours. But I've always been a bulk buyer. So one of the strategies I go for is to try to have 1 or 2 items pay for the whole pile. Mm-hmm. And then I have very little invested, if anything invested, in each individual item. So if they sit for a while, it's not like I have $20 sitting on that shelf that I need to get back. I've already made my money, and this is all gravy. But if you're out individually picking items, it's a harder thing, because now you've got $20 invested in that item, you got to get that back.
Yeah.
So someone could say that, okay, if you pay $200 for a thing, then really you're paying, I don't know, if you have 100 things, you're paying $2 an item, right? But I kind of look at it as a couple of items pay for the whole lot of stuff, and everything else is gravy. So if I got to throw it out because it sat there for a year in the antique booth, I got nothing in it, right? Or if it's somewhat valuable, well, first of all, if it breaks, I got nothing in it. If it's somewhat valuable, like maybe it's a $20 value, I can lot them up, or I can throw them in a local auction. And if I make my money, like a couple of bucks off the items, or it paid for the lot of stuff that I bought based on selling all this stuff I would normally throw out or take to the restore or thrift store, then everything that I sold from that lot is all gravy, and this just makes them, you know what I mean? So that kind of stuff. There's a lot more variables, I understand, because you're paying rate, rent, and commission, so that you have to kind of remember that had to come off all the sales and stuff. But to me, that's what I pick, is bulk items where one or two pieces are going to pay for everything.
Yeah.
And it's easier said than done once your mindset is in that. And that's why I much prefer yard sales, estate sales, and auctions over thrift stores, because I'm buying bulk items. And you can reduce the price. I'm not stuck. If you buy it for $20, you're basically have to sell it for $35 to get your money back.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So if I sold one or two items, everything else is free, and I got things sitting there for $15 or $20, I could drop it to 10.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? I'm still making money off that item.
Yeah, so, I think it really depends where you're selling as well, what you want to deal with, how much time you have, what you enjoy doing. Like all those factors are a big thing too. You know, like my basement's getting a little full right now. So if I have more bulk buys, it's just going to pile up where I already have stuff, right?
So you have to ask yourself, Carl, why is it getting full? And I know why mine's getting full, and I know that this week and next week it's going to get really empty. That's because I got the new booth.
The booth, yeah.
But before that, it was getting full because I wasn't paying attention to it. I wasn't listing online as much as I should. A lot of it was because I was working full-time, and this was part-time, but I was still picking full-time amount of inventory. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't want a good deal to go to waste. Like,
it's hard, isn't it? Yeah.
I want to jump all over it, right? Yeah. Going to this auction, I'm building a rapport with the auctioneer in the auction house, and it's really been beneficial to me. They call me up, make sure I'm coming. If I'm not coming there, they're like, oh, you're missing some good stuff, but we'll see you next time or whatever. Like, so we're texting, we're talking, you know what I mean?
Those connections you have are so important long term.
They're so important, right? I don't want to not go because, I'm too full. I need to figure out why I'm too full and correct that. You know what I mean?
All that stuff we're talking about now is stuff that we're always learning, always improving,
right.
Changing our minds about, especially as the market changes or where we're selling changes. I hope that was all interesting for people. We came up with a bunch of different things that we're trying to improve or fix, or like just even.
Yeah, I just want to add one more thing in there. Don't get me wrong. There's many times I grab a bunch of items and I pick stuff that needs to be cleaned and there's too much time invested, or it needs to be sorted and it's not worth the time. Right.
Or how many times have we been on like your show on Sunday nights there, and we show a piece of glass and then we flip it over as if there's a crack in it during the live show.
Well, I hope I didn't do that. Did I do that?
I think I've seen that in every show. not every Sunday, but you know what I mean. I think everyone's show once in a while they pick something up and then they realize there's an issue. Or for me, after the show, I'm looking at something and it's like, oh my god,
yeah,
just like missing pieces or whatever. That happens. That happens to everyone as well.
Yeah, and that would be part of it for sure. there's other things I'll pick up, and it's like, why the heck did I get this? Like, I'm gonna throw it out, right? Like,
I put things directly into the garbage.
Yeah,
it's not even worth like donating back. That's how bad that buy was. I do that on occasion. Hopefully not.
Yeah, and it does. And I think I don't think you're picking properly if you don't make mistakes or you don't do those kind of things. Like, because you're not taking enough chances. You're not going out enough time, right? So what you have to do is just reduce the risk. And that's kind of what I've learned. Just reduce the risk on some things. And then sometimes on the flip side, take more of a risk. Like it's you just feel it out and you go with your gut, and then you eventually learn and get better. So, all right, Carl, I think that might be the conclusion of another episode. What do you think?
Yeah, that was great. I hope people give us some feedback. It's always fun. I look forward to it.
All right. Well, this is the conclusion of podcast number 2 for Reseller Evolution. So we'll see you next week. See everybody next week for podcast number 3. We don't really have a topic in mind right now, but I'm sure it'll be fun and exciting and
guaranteed
necessary to listen to. So on YouTube, if you want to hit that subscribe button, we'd appreciate it. Leave a comment. Let us know what you think. And if you hear us on the just on the radio through a podcast, come to our YouTube channel anyways and leave a comment. I guess is the way to do that. So awesome, Carl. So awesome to sit here with you and figure out what we're going to do and what we learned.
Thanks, Scotty. I'll see you next week.
All right. See everybody next week.
Bye.